Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
All right, well, thanks for coming, everyone. I really would like to thank Lisa for coming because we don't do books that are too controversial here. And this book really isn't that controversial, but it's controversial to the extent that many people really love this book. And probably an equal number really hated it. So controversial to that. The book is called Bad Mother by Ayelet Waldman. She's the wife of the novelist Michael Chabon. And the subtitle is called The Chronicle of Maternal Crimes, Minor Calamities, and Occasional Moments of Grace. If you read the flyer, you know what it's about. And Lisa is a former newspaper reporter, PR specialist, former president of the Moms Club. And she has some Moms Club's people here. And she said she wouldn't do the review unless we had put in a newsletter here that mothers with children are welcome, so thanks for the invitation. If you guys want to have time to hear one of these reviews too. So here's Lisa to tell us about the book, Bad Mother.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. And thanks to all of you for coming today. I really appreciate it. As Joe said, today we're going to take a look at the book Bad Mother, A Chronicle of Maternal Crimes, Minor Calamities, and Occasional Moments of Grace by Ayelet Waldman. It was published a couple months ago by Doubleday. A quote from the book jacket: "If you work, you're neglectful. If you stay home, you're smothering. If you discipline, you're buying them a spot on the shrink's couch. If you let them run wild, they'll be into drugs by 7th grade. If you buy organic, you're blowing their college fund. If you don't, you're risking all sorts of allergies and illnesses. Is it any wonder that so many women refer to themselves at one time or another as bad mothers?" Thanks to Joe Nash, Director of Circulation, for inviting me. He had asked me over the summer if I'd like to do a book review of Bad Mother, and I thought, okay, what's Joe trying to tell me with the bad mother stuff? I think I might be a good person to review this, though. I have 2 small children at home, and I think, like so many thousands and thousands of mothers today, I want so passionately to do a good job, but I am so sure that even on my best days, I rate maybe a C+. Enough about me, a little more about Ayelet Waldman. She is in her mid-40s. She was born in Israel to American parents, raised in Montreal and New Jersey. She calls herself the typical Jewish American princess. She was the author of the Mommy Track mystery novels. Has anybody read any of those? Okay. 7 of those now. She says the series is done, about a part-time sleuth and full-time mother called Julia Applebaum. She's also the author of some other fiction novels, among them Daughter's Keeper and Love and Other Impossible Pursuits, which is a movie that just came out starring Natalie Portman. I don't know if anyone has seen that yet. Her essays on a wide variety of topics have appeared in the New York Times, Vogue, Salon.com, Elle, and other media outlets. She's a graduate of Harvard Law School and worked as a public defender in California before she turned to writing. She was also classmates at Harvard with a young man from Hawaii by the name of Barack Obama. Are you depressed yet? Because I'm totally depressed. And please forgive this segue, but speaking of depression, Waldman is bipolar, also known as manic depressive, and she is very out about that in her essays and in her interviews. She says she actually does a lot of great work when she's in a manic phase. I would certainly think so. She says that manics often have trouble setting personal boundaries. She said you can usually tell who the manic is at a party because she's telling a group of people about her husband's latest herpes outbreak. They kind of don't know when to stop sharing information. And considering that she's a memoirist in this incarnation, I think that's actually a good thing. You want a lot of information from a memoirist. Her husband is novelist Michael Chabon. He won the Pulitzer Prize in 2001 for The Amazing Adventures of Cavalier and Clay. He's also the author of Yiddish Policeman's Union, Wonder Boys, and several other novels, all of which have received tremendous critical acclaim. He has a new book out right now in hardcover called Manhood for Amateurs: The Pleasures and Regrets of a Husband, Father, and Son. Waldman said she and her husband work well together. They read over each other's work, and they have a wonderful creative give and take in their home, which I think is fabulous, which is a lot better than it is at my house, where it's like, honey, it's garbage night. Did you get the garbage out? That's about the creative give and take level at our home. The family lives in Berkeley, California. They have 4 children, ranging in ages from 6 to 15. Please keep Berkeley, California in mind as you listen to her writing. Ayelet Waldman comes to notoriety. Waldman and Shaban are sort of a hot couple nowadays, very much media darlings. They get a lot of favorable attention from the media, and actually there was a profile on the two of them in the New York Times about 2 weeks ago. Waldman and her husband apparently have this amazing romantic relationship, and they're always scampering off to the boudoir together, and isn't that fabulous? She wrote an essay called Mother Love a few years ago that was included in the book Because I Said So, and it also appeared under, I think, a different title in the New York Times. The essay explores the conviction that a woman should consider her spousal relationship more important than her relationships with her children. She writes that, quote, a clear hierarchy of love is essential to a stable and healthy marriage. Waldman summarizes her ideal family dynamic. He and I are the core of what he cherishes. The children are satellites, beloved but tangential. Waldman posits that children who are made aware of their secondary rank in their parents' affections are, quote, much more successful, happier, live longer, and have healthier lives than those who grow up with different expectations. The blogosphere exploded. Women claimed that anyone who felt this way was really not in a fit position to be a mother, that once you have kids, you should be transferring your emotional, your mental energies, any erotic impulses you might have, take that energy and put it towards raising your children. Men wrote in and said, how do I get my wife to be more like you? And Waldman, to her everlasting credit, said, try doing the dishes every once in a while. She was invited on the Oprah Winfrey Show to explain herself and talk about her views, which actually sound pretty conservative, but she didn't really say it in a confessional tone or anything. She's just saying the marriage is the basis of the family. You know, if the marriage is weak, the family is weak. When she came out onto the stage at the Oprah Winfrey Show, one of the women in the audience yelled, "Let me at her." So that kind of gives you an idea of why she got to write this book. It was because of all this criticism in the Oprah Winfrey Show that she decided to write the book, Bad Mother. It's a collection of essays that are knitted together along essays related to motherhood, and she's asking some important questions. Why are women today so quick to police each other's mothering? Why are we so hard on ourselves and each other instead of giving ourselves and others a break? What does it mean to be a mother for these new generations that came of age after the feminist movement of the 1960s? One author has called women who are in their 30s and 40s now women making pre-Betty Friedan choices in a post-Betty Friedan universe. Why are the stakes so high in raising children these days? Why are we so focused on reading readiness and computer readiness that we're missing out on a lot of the joys of childhood? I did a very unscientific survey and asked my mother and my mother-in-law what it was like when they were raising kids back in the 50s and early 60s, before the feminine mystique came out. And my mother-in-law said, and she raised 6 kids in South Troy, and she said, you really just kind of got on with the job. She said everyone had a copy of Dr. Spock. If you had questions about feeding or toilet training, you asked your mom or your sisters or the doctor, but there wasn't all this agonizing over details. And my mother said that, you know, she worried if we were slightly late for milestones. If she had questions, she asked the pediatrician or her mother. But she said she had already talked to her friends over lunch a few months ago about what women today are dealing with and when they're raising children. And they all said they would never do it today, that it's just gotten too complicated. There are way too many choices and way too much stress. We had feminism. I am extraordinarily grateful for it. Women are lawyers, we're professors, we're doctors, we're astronauts, but we're still up till midnight baking cupcakes for the school bake sale the next day and feeling guilty if we bring in the store-bought stuff. The woman who just won the Nobel Prize for Medicine, her name escapes me at the moment, I'm sorry. When she got the call at 5 a.m. that she won the prize, Guess what she was doing at the time? She wasn't sleeping. She wasn't getting ready to go to the lab. She was folding laundry. I don't think Barack Obama, liberated new man that he is, was folding laundry when he got his call from the Nobel Committee. I read this book over twice. I thought it was edgy. I thought it was funny. There were some lines in it that I thought, oh my God, that happens to me. That is exactly what I am dealing with. I would definitely recommend it to those who are raising children now, who have done it, or who are thinking about it. But there are other books on this topic that I would recommend much more heartily. Let's look a little closely at the book. Waldman was a high-powered attorney in California when she switched to being a stay-at-home mom. She felt that she was missing out on her first daughter's growth and development, and when she was pregnant with her second child, she decided to put the diplomas in the box and go home and be a stay-at-home mom. She says, "It was everything that I thought it would be. Mommy and me, story time at the library, gymboree, long stroller walks with my stay-at-home mommy friends. And then the next day, it was mommy and me, story time at the library, gymboree, and long stroller walks with my stay-at-home mommy friends. And the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. Within a week, I had gone mad. I took a certain satisfaction in the fact that now I was the most important person in the day-to-day life of my child, but I was also bored and miserable. And the fact that I was bored and miserable terrified me. A good mother's never bored, is she? And she's never miserable. A good mother doesn't resent looking up from her novel to examine a child's drawing. She doesn't stare at the clock in music class, willing it along with all the power of a fourth grader waiting for recess. She doesn't hide the finger paints because she can't stand the mess. I do that all the time. A good mother not only puts her children's needs and interests above her own, but she enjoys doing it. If I wasn't enjoying myself, then I wasn't a good mother. On the contrary, I was a bad one." There was a song that came out after World War I called "How Are You Going to Keep Them Down on the Farm After They've Seen Gay Paris?" Topic of the song being these men had seen war in the trenches and disported themselves with Parisian prostitutes, and now they were expected to go back home and farm the family land in Iowa, and that probably wasn't going to cut a whole lot of ice with them. Now, I think if you have a woman who is at Ayelet Waldman's level, who's been educated at Harvard, who's extremely well-connected, who had a very high-powered career, maybe going to kindergarten class is going to seem like a huge letdown. But I think for the vast majority of women, the experience is maybe not as stressful. She says that the women I know are, on some level, unfulfilled. The women I know spend a lot of time trying to avoid wondering whether the sacrifice was worth it. It's that very wondering, it's the being unfulfilled that makes us feel the worst. At the other end of the spectrum, Waldman notes that the alternative to feeling disappointed and anxious is to embrace the role of the slacker mom. Roseanne Barr once said that if my kids are still alive at the end of the day, I have done my job as a mother. She says another strategy some of us have is to come Another strategy some of us have come up with to deal with our sense of failure and guilt is to rebel, to embrace the very identity we are afraid of, to loudly proclaim ourselves bad moms. We bad moms proudly wear our ambivalence on our sleeves. We vociferously resist and resent the glorification of the self-abnegating mother. We snarl at the mention of Dora the Explorer and Raffi. We shrug at the orange Cheeto dust smeared across our children's mouths. We swap stories of our big box travails. Your kid ran away from you at Target? That's nothing. I yelled at mine in the parking lot of IKEA and someone called the cops. That's my favorite line in the book. We commiserate about how much we loathe the wannabe good mothers with their aggressive school volunteering, their bugaboo strollers, and their petunia pickle-bottom diaper bags. We even confess that on rare occasions, and only under duress, we spank our children. Waldman asks, is there really no other way to be a mother in contemporary American society than to be locked into the cultural zero-sum game of I'm okay, you suck, or I suck, everybody else is okay. It's hard enough trying to take care of the many needs of children without living up to an impossible standard of perfection at the same time. I totally understand that. I am totally sure that on days I am just not doing the right thing, that everyone else has it together, but I am not making the right choices. My kids are always the wildest ones at playgroup, and I have no idea how to calm them down. I didn't breastfeed. I had 2 planned C-sections. I don't just raise my voice, I yell. In May, that time of year when we start raising the windows and letting some cool air in, I go to my neighbors and apologize in advance for the summer of yelling that they are going to have to endure. And they're retired people, and they say, do you think you are the only mother who has ever yelled at her children? And I always think that I should sound like the mother in Bambi who says, this is the meadow. We must stay out of the meadow, for man is there. If I were Bambi's mother, meadow, out of the meadow, no meadow, out. I mean, I yell at my children all the time, and I feel so bad about it. One of the chapters in here, and I turned right to this when I read the table of contents, was breast is best. First, I'm going to take a little sip here. Not of breast milk, just water. I thought in this book that I was finally and long last going to receive pardon and absolution for the sin of bottle feeding my children. I had planned to breastfeed. I took classes on it. I know that there are many wonderful benefits, and I am so glad that mothers are encouraged to do that now. I had planned to do it with my first child. There was a lactation consultant at the hospital, and she was really nice. I remember I had a C-section, and I think the second night I was allowed to get up and walk around, and I was pushing my daughter's little bassinet down the hallway, and they had a poster up on the wall in a little cabinet extolling the virtues of breastfeeding, the benefits of breast milk, and there was a list of women in history who had breastfed. It was basically a pantheon of female achievement throughout the ages. We had Queen Elizabeth I, we had Queen Elizabeth II, we had Sandra Day O'Connor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Hillary Rodham Clinton, Eleanor Roosevelt, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And also on the list was Mary, mother of Jesus. Now, I'm sorry, but if you were raised Catholic, that was some serious guilt to lay on a woman who was trying to get it together. So, I'm a little conservative about body things, but I wanted to give it a try because I heard that breast milk had so many benefits. And I also thought that as a feminist, it might be really cool to breastfeed out in public and kind of support the sisterhood. And if I had to breastfeed at Mass, I thought that would be really cool. But my milk didn't come in. So there went that plan. Ray and I went to a lactation consultant who rigged me up with a little bottle of breast milk on my back, 2 very thin silicone tubes that came down this way, taped with medical tape over the girls here, and apparently allowed enough milk to come out so that my daughter could learn how to latch on and still get some milk at the same time. So she rigged us up with this. I went home. I'm sitting in the nursery decorated in the Beatrix Potter theme, and we're trying to get Olivia to latch on, and I looked at my husband and said, we're in a weird area here, aren't we? And he said, we most certainly are. Let's turn to Waldman's experience. Just a little bit more about my experience. We had a lactation consultant come to the house who was wonderful. She was from England. She was so mellow and laid back, and she was really great at trying to help me. And I just realized that, my child was losing too much weight, and this just was not going to happen. And I remember, I will never ever forget this until the day I die. I was sitting on the couch in the living room. It was February, so it got dark really early. Ray came home from work. I hadn't turned the lights on yet. There were dead floral arrangements from when the baby was born up on the mantle. And I am sitting on the living room couch, dripping tears and snarf on my child because I could not breastfeed her. And Ray, men, if there's a problem, they work the problem. They don't say, oh, honey, come here. They offer you solutions. He said, do you think those cavemen didn't wish they could go to Target and get a can of Similac? He said, just break out the formula. So thank God for Ray for solving the problem. Waldman had a kind of a similar experience. Let's read what she says. Once when my son Abraham was 6 years old, I was standing in line at my local bakery. I had him in a sling and I was feeding him. The sling's fabric was twisted and my hair was caught in the knot, and the baby had finally taken his bottle, and I was loath to adjust anything for fear of disturbing our tenuous peace. I rocked a bit on my heels. The baby paused in his sucking and I held my breath. Suddenly, a voice behind me said, you know, breast is best. I turned. The speaker, a woman a few years older than I, smiled pleasantly. Now, the correct response to that comment might have been a stern rejoinder to mind her own business. It might have even included a series of expletives. Instead, what I did was burst into tears and launch into a long explanation about how the milk in the bottle was my own, pumped at 4 in the morning while everyone else in the house was asleep. In fact, I had been pumping breast milk for Abraham every 2 hours. I told this stranger because my son was born with a palate abnormality that made it impossible for him to suck correctly from the breast. She ended up flying to and there is actually such a place called the Lactation Institute in Los Angeles, California, to see if they could get it together. And they claim that they can help any nursing pair, meaning a mother and her infant, and they rigged up a system where she would feed him with a long silicone needle and a plunger, where she would give him just enough milk to sort of simulate the amount of milk that would come out if he was breastfeeding. Let's see. Apparently, in between feeding him and pumping her own milk, she had about 1 hour left in the day to sleep and tend to her other 3 children. She said to the nurse, "But I have 3 other children. When do I sleep?" "Well," the lactation consultant said, giving my shoulder a squeeze, "it's really just a matter of how committed you are. In a few months, I'm sure he'll have learned to do this on his own." I do mention, though, a couple times in this chapter, Waldman mentions her breastfeeding bona fides. She said that she had breastfed her first 3 children with no problems, including one of them until he was 3 years old. So she's drinking the Kool-Aid, too. I was really kind of looking for her to say, you know what? I bottle fed my kids from the get-go. I just cracked open the can of Similac and everything was fine. But she didn't. It's all about sort of every other paragraph is, and when I breastfed my firstborn, and then when I breastfed my secondborn, and I kind of ended up still feeling really guilty because I bottle fed my kids. We got one more quote here. One of her concerns, and I do think this is a very legitimate concern, there are some parents who are very into attachment parenting, which is something that Dr. William Sears is very much in favor of, and he's written books on this. And she says, "I'm sure that there are women who circumcise their sons, who use disposable diapers, who feed their infants formula, who are smug, snarky, and unpleasant. But there seems to be a particular brand of sanctimony practiced by those who choose to exclusively breastfeed, use a family bed, and wear their babies in slings. Choices generally associated with attachment parenting. Proponents of attachment parenting nurse their babies, wean them as late as possible, wear them in slings, co-sleep, and reject any discipline that is not positive." She had mentioned that a lot of these women are on blogs and chat rooms, and they can be quite vicious and unsupportive of women who are not making similar choices, and is suggesting that if you're having any kind of doubts about your parenting skills, about nursing, about potty training, stay away from the blogs, stay away from the chat rooms. If you have questions, ask a trusted friend, ask a sister, ask a mom, ask a pediatrician, but just stay away from those chat rooms. more breast milk. I was extremely grateful for a chapter entitled The Life I Want for Them, which appears at the end of the book. It's about our society's pressure nowadays to produce super children, those who are reading well above grade level, who are on the honors track while they're still in kindergarten, and the pressure we put on them by enrolling them in special classes and schools and programs from a very young age. Kids are now taking music and dance and soccer at ages 2 or 3, whereas maybe people my age started in elementary school. A friend of mine had her daughter in a soccer school at age 3, and she said the kids were way more interested in just dumping out the bins of soccer balls and kind of rolling them around than they were in learning about the fundamentals of the game. My daughter attends a dance school, and they offer dance for kids starting at age 3. And at that point, they're still in pull-ups, most of them, which makes for really unsightly bulges under the leotard. And they spend most of the class with their fingers up their noses, so they're not really learning, you know, the five positions of dance or anything. And I remember a few Saturdays ago, one of the mothers was looking through that two-way mirror where you can look into the dance class, but the kids can't see you. And she said, "Oh, God bless their little hearts. They can't keep a straight line to save themselves." And we'll see what Waldman says on this subject. It was Sophie, that's her firstborn, who is now 15, who began for us what became a long lesson in the folly of expectations. When she was in preschool, I began buying her first readers, convinced that it was only a matter of time before she'd be whipping through the Chronicles of Narnia. When she was still painstakingly sounding out words at age 7, I called my mother, completely distraught. "She's only reading at the first grade level," I wailed. There was silence at the other end of the line. Finally, my mother said, "Honey, she is in first grade." More hysteria. "But Michael was reading by age 4, and I was such an early reader." "What are you talking about?" my mother said. "You took forever to learn to read. You were the last in your class." What? Still, even knowing of my own average kindergarten abilities didn't prevent me from being disappointed that my daughter didn't excel. Why, and this is so true, why is it no longer enough for us that our children do well? They must instead be prodigies. My daughter is now in first grade. She was in kindergarten last year, and they didn't have, the report cards came out, it was in the middle of the year and at the end of the year, and they didn't get grades. It was more just skills emerging, skills being worked on, skills mastered, and it had things like counting from 1 to 10, counting from 10 to 20. So I went in and sat down with Mrs. Black, who was due to retire at the end of the school year, and she said, "Olivia she's just a joy to teach. She is the sweetest girl. I just love having her in my class, and she just shows an eagerness to learn." And I said, "What about her academics? What about her academic progress?" I hope Mrs. Black went to the teacher's lounge and had a really good laugh at my expense. I was asking this about a 5-year-old. There are a couple kids in my daughter's class who came into kindergarten reading kind of the basic words, and now in first grade are reading at a 3rd grade level. And it just kills me that my daughter isn't doing the same. She's been read to since she was a baby. We read to her all the time. We always went to the library. Why is she not reading, Bad Mother or something like this right now? So I talked to my teacher, or I talked to Olivia's teacher, and then I talked to the librarian. I volunteer at the library in her school, and then I realized I needed to talk to someone with a PhD after their name about this topic. And she just said that so many mothers have this concern that it's not enough for them to read at their grade level. They have to be reading beyond it. Olivia's current teacher said, "She is fine. She is just where she needs to be. She's doing fine." She said, "I don't know where parents expected the kids should be able to read when they get into kindergarten or first grade." She said, "That's for a child to be able to read at a 3rd grade level now is unusual." And she said, "You know what? In a few years, they all catch up and everybody is in the same boat, so don't worry about it." Other chapters in the book deal with sex education, relationships with mothers-in-law. One particularly emotional chapter deals with Waldman's termination of a pregnancy where the fetus had a chromosomal abnormality. And there was a very good chance that the baby would have catastrophic special needs, and there was also a very good chance that the baby would be born not affected at all by the chromosomal abnormality. It talks about the discussion she had with her husband, the terror about finding out that the chromosome test was abnormal. Another chapter, she speaks very frankly about her bipolar disorder and the concern that her medication, which she had to take, may have affected her children in utero, and her concern that this disorder may be genetically passed on to her children. There's also an interesting chapter where she muses that her youngest son might be gay, and wouldn't it be cool if he was, because when he got older, she could go shopping for home furnishings with him and his partner. So it's, like I said, it's edgy and it's funny. I don't think this is a book that is going to sit very well with political or social conservatives. She brings up a really great point about our fascination with and condemnation of women like Susan Smith, Andrea Yates, Britney Spears, because as she says, by defining the kinds of mothers we're not, it makes it easier to stomach the kinds of mothers we are. She even mentions the mom up in Saratoga Springs a couple years ago who was arrested for snorting cocaine off her infant's belly while she was breastfeeding it. I was actually kind of impressed. I mean, talk about multitasking. I couldn't even breastfeed my kid with my husband and lactation consultant in 2 silicone tubes, and she's snorting blow while she's breastfeeding. I'm like, wow. Wow, that's amazing. There's a really great German word called, and forgive me if my pronunciation is not correct here, Schadenfreude, which means joy in another's misfortune. Only the Germans would have a word like that. You know that crew out in Colorado a couple weeks ago, the Balloon Boy? This was more the dad's fault. I was loving that. That was the best week for parenthood in my house. They had rigged up a helium balloon, sent it up in the air, and then called the media claiming that their son had crawled in it, took the lead line off, and the thing went up in the air. And the craft flew halfway across Colorado with the world's media watching and wondering if this poor boy was going to survive. Turns out they rigged the whole thing, told little Junior to go hide in the garage while the media was chasing down the helium craft. And I just told Ray, it's like, I'm a good mom. I'm a good mom. What did I think of the book? Bad Mother, let me see, I'll go through my list of magazines here, was included on the list of 50 books you must read now in an issue published in July in Newsweek. And my friend Kathy from the book club sent me an excellent rant about, who picks these books? Who decides this is what everybody has to read? My theory is someone who works at Newsweek hooked up after happy hour, someone who works at the publishing house, and the following morning over breakfast, someone says, you know what, you really got to get this book into your magazine. I think that's how that all happens. I wanted so much to love this book because I feel very insecure about my parenting skills, and I wanted someone to say, it's okay, we all make mistakes, nobody is perfect. If I had seen this in the bookstore, I would have bought the hardcover immediately. Because I'm dealing with, like so many mothers, with issues of guilt and inadequacy. Reviews from the critics were very, very favorable. As I said, I think Michael Chabon and Ayelet Waldman are kind of media darlings now, and I do suspect that if she posted her grocery list on her blog, the New York Times would say, oh, that's so brilliant. Reviews from readers, however, were distinctly mixed. Many reviewers said she is funny, and she is, that she really hits the target a lot of times, and she does. I mean, there were quotes in this book that I thought, oh my God, that is exactly what I think all the time. She brings up a lot of excellent points, but she's making the same complaints that have been made for about 30 years now, and she's not really offering any new choices. I'm not saying that she has no right to complain, because when The Feminine Mystique came out, that Betty Friedan wrote, a lot of people criticized her, saying, you're college educated, you live in a very comfortable suburb, your husband has a great job, do you know how many people in the world would kill to be a comfortable American housewife? Betty broke ground. Betty blew the lid off stuff about women who were educated at places like Wellesley and Smith and Harvard, but then were told, go back home and run the PTA. Betty also explored on a lot of different levels, the media, business, politics, what was wrong with how women were treated in our society. Whereas Ayelet Waldman is talking pretty much just about her own experience, which actually is very, very narrow. She and her husband are wealthy, they are famous, they are intellectual, they live in an extremely liberal enclave, Berkeley, California, and she speaks solely about her experience of those of friends like her. She's not really analyzing what's going on in the media or the parenting magazines. She's not asking, where are the part-time jobs that we were supposed to have? I have a friend who is 65 now, and she was working in Manhattan in a career in publishing back when a lot of women didn't even have pin money jobs outside the home. And she said, back in the early 70s, we thought, by 1985, 1990, this combining motherhood and a career, it's going to be solved. There'll be flex time and job sharing and part-time and working from home, and we really haven't gotten that far on it, and I think that's incredibly disappointing. There are other books that, although I do like Waldman's book and I would recommend it, there are others that I would recommend much more heartily. One is called Perfect Madness, Motherhood in the Age of Anxiety by Judith Warner. Came out about 4 years ago. She was living in Paris with her husband. Again, they are also well-educated, well-connected, and she was blown away at how the French and other Europeans took to parenting. It was so much less stressful than it was here. Society and business supported them at a level that we just don't get here. And when she came back to the United States, she realized how good she had it over there. And my friend Monica, she lived in the Netherlands for a couple years and had mentioned, and I will always remember this, that they had some indoor play areas for children. But instead of in the United States, where we hover right over our children and say, gentle hands, Christopher, gentle hands, or good sharing, Olivia, that's good. The parents are in another room having a coffee or a soda or even a Heineken. The kids are left to do their own thing. The parents are not hovering around them like helicopters, breathing down their neck and living their lives for them. Another book that I don't have with me, it's called Bitch in the House, 26 Women Tell the Truth About Sex, Solitude, Work, Motherhood, and Marriage. Came out in 2002. That's a collection of essays by 26 different women about these topics, and I think they're incredibly honest. Another book that I would recommend, I don't even know if you can get it on Amazon actually, Living with Contradictions, A Married Feminist. This came out in 1976, and everything that is written in this book, sadly, holds true today. How you want to be mom, the light of your children's life, but you also want to get out of the house every once in a while. Another great book, and I recommend this one so wholeheartedly, is The Mommy Myth, The Idolization of Motherhood and How It Has Undermined All Women, by Susan Douglas and Meredith Michaels. Douglas is on the faculty at the University of Michigan, and Michaels is on the faculty at Smith College over in Massachusetts. And they really analyze advertising, media, our obsession with celebrity motherhood, where not only do you have to be a terrific mother, you have to look sexy now too. They talk about our idolization of Princess Diana, God bless her, when she was still alive, about how she just breathed new life into motherhood and how she was devoted to her 2 boys. But she also had a chef, maids, someone to look after her wardrobe, and a job outside the home. So it isn't always about staying home 24/7, 365. Do I have any advice for mothers? Like I should be giving some out because I need it so much myself. One of my big pieces of advice is get rid of these. Beth has a new puppy. She could maybe use some paper to line the crate. Lynn's got a bird. You might need some paper for the cage. Parenting magazines do not exist to make you feel better about your parenting. They do not exist to give you advice and help you raise your children. They exist to get revenue for themselves through their advertisers, to sell the products that are advertised. They exist to induce fear, guilt, and insecurity in mothers in order to sell the products advertised on their pages. If there's an article in there about SIDS, you're going to see a couple products in that magazine, special little alarms, special sleepers that can help alert you to a child who's not breathing correctly. Even the formula ads in there will say at the bottom, breast milk is best, so there's some more guilt. If you have known me for more than 10 minutes, I have probably told you this story, so please forgive me if you've already heard this from me. I was reading a parenting magazine when Olivia was about 2 years old, and they had a little article in there about how you could combine vegetable eating with cultural education. They said you could take a bell pepper and cut it into julienne slices. And you know when you do that, the ends are a little curved? It suggested that you arrange them in Chinese characters to spell out happiness, love, joy. And I was dumb enough to think, oh my God, I've never done that. I never thought to do that. Wow, 2 birds with 1 stone, vegetables and learning about other cultures. That's when I realized that these magazines were pretty messed up. I mean, that is the most constipated thing I have ever heard about in my life. You want to teach your kids about China, call Hunan Palace, have them deliver some Kung Pao chicken, and show them on the National Geographic map you got at home. Here's where China is, godless communists, okay? And that's as far as, that's all a 4-year-old really needs to know about China. One thing I did think was interesting, Cookie, this one is the worst, man. They have ads for, like, it's very, very upscale. They have ads for Ralph Lauren for children, Pottery Barn nurseries. They have articles about child-friendly resorts in places like Bali and Fiji. I was looking through it for stuff to crack on today, and actually there was an article about Rachel Griffiths, a movie and television actress that I do like. She's from Australia, and there was a good quote. She said, "In Australia, I don't think women stay up all night baking cupcakes for their kids' bake sale just to prove they're a good mommy. I know we do that here in America." And Judith Warner also mentions in her book, when she lived in France, people aren't burning the midnight oil making cupcakes either. I think that's because their schools are adequately funded in these countries, and they don't need to raise $50, $100, $150 at a time to buy a couple soccer balls for their gym class. Whereas here in this country, if the Pentagon says, we want big shiny planes with lots of lights and buttons that can drop bombs, Congress says, here you go, we'll buy you 3, but our schools are definitely getting short shrift in the funding department. One of my concerns with these books is, just a little background on myself. I had very lofty dreams for myself in college. I was sure that by this age, I'd be writing for a major metropolitan daily newspaper, I would be in the state assembly, and as with everybody else, reality sets in around age 25. I'm probably more intelligent than the average head of cabbage, and I am passionately interested in issues, but I'm not intensely ambitious. I am caught, as I suspect the vast majority of mothers in America are, between the world of highly educated, well-connected women from Manhattan, Westchester County, Georgetown, Marin County, like Ayelet Waldman, and also the heartland conservative Christians who fully embrace their traditional roles as homemakers and even homeschoolers. Man, there's a scary thought. I can barely get it together just to keep my house clean, and they're teaching their kids chemistry. That's devotion. They pump out a great number of books. If you go into a Christian bookstore, they have just racks and racks of books on parenting and homeschooling. And some of them are actually like very hip and very funny. Where are the books for us? Where are the books for women who went to small liberal arts colleges or state universities who are actually, frankly, pretty happy being home with their kids, but, you know, wish they could get out a little more, or wish they had a part-time job because when the kids go to school, it's really lonely. What about moms who maybe want an indoor play place where they can drop their kids for a couple hours, not where they can be there and hover over them for 2 hours, but just for 2 hours where they can go get a cup of coffee or go get a mammogram or go get their teeth checked or something. Waldman uses a quote, corrosive guilt and anxiety. I have some guilt and anxiety, but it's not corrosive. And maybe if I went to Harvard Law School and I hung out with Barack Obama and I was a public defender, I would hate being home. My anxiety is much more mild. I feel guilty that I don't want to play Candyland 5 times in a row. I snap at my kids sometimes. I yell at my kids sometimes, and I swore I never would. And sometimes when my kids ask me, I'm kind of clueless about what to do, because baby boomer parents and us now, we're brought up more to seek consensus and discuss and not really lay down the law. And I think retired people nowadays, I know my neighbors say this, they say, you parents now, you're afraid to lay down the law. You're afraid to be the boss in your own house. And my mother-in-law said back then, mothers and fathers just embraced the fact that they were the boss. That they didn't gather the family together to talk about a homework plan. It was, you get home, you have a snack, you do your homework, end of discussion. So maybe one of these days, in between my volunteer work and trying to get Olivia to study her spelling words, I'll write a book about us, or maybe you can. I also wonder if this is an American sickness. Judith Warner in her books talks about her in a lot of European countries. They look at us and think, oh my gosh, you people are living through your children. Rachel Griffith had also said elsewhere in that interview that it's just a totally different scene in Australia. And I think Australians are much more laid back about a lot of things than we are. But I'm wondering if this obsession with planning our children's lives and getting them on the right intellectual track is purely an American thing. Certainly in this country, we rely much more on people being independent. There aren't the kind of social programs in place in this country like health care and health insurance for everybody, extended maternity leaves, job sharings, things that are just taken for granted in European countries that they have to make their lives easier as parents. Another thing she asks about is, where are the fathers in all of this? I don't think any of our husbands lie awake at night and think, how can I combine my career with being a good father? You know, dads just don't worry about that stuff. I am way too emotionally invested in how my daughter does on her spelling test every Friday morning. I say to Ray, because he drives her to school, okay, when I was reviewing spelling words with her, she had a little trouble with many and a little trouble with sled. So quiz her as you're driving down Whitehall Road, many and sled. And he's just like, will you just stop it? So that's all I have for today. I wanted to thank you very, very much for coming and listening to me. I surely do appreciate it. This one is good. This one's a lot better. This one is much, much better. Thank you very much. Oh, yes. I have a list, in case you wanted to check something out of the library or check something out on Amazon, I have a list of all these titles and the author and the publishers back there on the table. Does anyone have any questions or comments or discussion points?
Have you thought about being a stand-up comedian?
Maybe I could take this on tour. I would love to do that. It'd get me out of the house, right? Actually, when I get home, I'm going to have to change. I thought seriously about wearing sweats and a bathrobe over this, because that's what I wear every day at home. And if I greet my son when he gets off the bus, he is not going to recognize me in real clothes. This is the first time I've had a waistband on pants for like months and months. So, and I actually, because, and I think a lot of mothers do this, if you have a little extra money, you don't spend it on yourself, you spend it on the kids. And I read an article about how you're supposed to replace your bras at least every 18 months. Mine have been around since I was in graduate school, and I realized they just weren't doing anything anymore. So I took pity on myself and I went to JCPenney and I got some new bras, and they made this enormous difference. And my son, who was 4 years old, he was sitting on my lap reading, and he poked at one and said, "Are those new?" It's bras really work. So get your new splurge on the new bras. Oh, thank you very much.